In the world of sports, your performance is everything. So what happens when our minds end up impacting our performance? Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Mindful Sports Podcast. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Mindful Sports. I had some other stuff planned for today, but I wanted to take this and instead use the recent big upheaval from tennis that we have seen with Naomi Osaka first announcing that she wasn't going to talk to the press and then announcing that she was withdrawing from the tournament entirely. I wanted to talk about this because it's specifically for mental health reasons that she chose to take these steps. And this is a perfect example of some of the things that we've talked about and of how our minds can impact our performance and can influence the decisions that we make because of the things that we are dealing with mentally. Now, a lot of times in sports psychology, we're really more focused on things like meditation, visualization, concentration, and those aspects. However, this field blends in quite often where a sports psychologist ends up uncovering mental health issues that we see in athletes, whether it be anxiety or depression or other issues that athletes or coaches may be dealing with. And so I thought that it was very appropriate and very important to stop for a moment, push back the other things that were planned, and address this situation. Because I think that this was the exact right thing that Naomi needed to do. And I absolutely fully support her in this decision. And I know there's a lot of controversy back and forth, and there's a lot of arguments back and forth. And there are valid arguments on both sides. There are arguments that she should still be talking to the press because that's part of the deal. There is arguments that why are athletes talking to the press when they're paid to play sports and not to be PR for a team or a coach or an organization. And these are both valid arguments when it comes specifically to interaction with the press. And that's where I wanted to start because that was the first step that was taken. And for someone of Naomi's stature to stop and say, no, I can't do this right now, and be vulnerable in this moment, and saying, I need to take care of myself. This is something that we don't often see, or when we do see, it's presented routinely until recently, the past couple years, as an extremely negative thing, that it's somehow irresponsible or wrong for players to be able to do this. That, oh, well, they signed a contract and, they were aware that they had to do press interactions. Okay, all of that is fine and great, but that still doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be able to do it all the time. This is one of those times where we see the pressure that is put on these athletes, especially your top tier elite athletes. I mean, she's currently ranked number 2 in the world. In the world, she is the number 2 female tennis player. That is a lot of expectations that she's going to have on her. That automatically puts her as a favorite in almost every competition. And given the fact that she's won the past 3 Grand Slams, yeah, people are expecting some major things from her. But she wasn't in a place where she felt that she could perform, that she could handle everything else and meet those expectations. Whether those be our expectations for her coach's expectations for her, the sports expectations for her, or her own expectations. She needed this time, and she was brave enough, strong enough, vulnerable enough to state that she needed that. And I think this is something that athletes themselves struggle with. This is something that athletes have a culture about. We've talked a little bit about the culture of sports and how it's not really conducive to athletes being able to speak out about their mental health issues. And so what she did in taking these steps this past weekend is monumental for an athlete of her stature. There have been other athletes who have withdrawn from competitions or said that they needed time off or retired from sports, but they weren't those high profile household names. They weren't top ranked players. Some were maybe mid-tier, some were lower tier. Some might have been on the fringe of that top tier, maybe at the lower end of that top tier. But the majority of your athletes won't speak out about this. And you will almost never hear a top tier athlete do something like this. And that is a lot of the culture that is built into sports. There are going to be a number of people that are going to look at Naomi's situation and say she's weak, and say that she doesn't have what it takes to be in that top position because she can't handle the pressures, because she can't handle the expectations. Maybe there's some truth to that. Maybe there is. Or maybe, just maybe, we have our thoughts and our expectations for athletes way off base from where they should be. Maybe we shouldn't be expecting so much from our athletes that they feel like they have to suppress these things, because we're not viewing them as humans. We're not allowing them to be human, to have faults, to have failures, to have struggles, because we've put such a high expectation on them. So maybe this is something that's always been there, and we have just refused to see it, acknowledge it, or even accept it. So now I want to take that short little break and then come back and talk more about her leaving the tournament and the impact of that decision beyond simply not fulfilling what she has as an obligation that we see of talking to the press. Welcome back, everybody. So, we talked a little bit initially about Naomi and her reaction with the press and what that could mean or why that might be from the grand scheme of things. But what about actually stepping away from the tournament itself? That's a whole nother level from simply saying that you're not going to talk to the press at a competition, that you're not going to speak to people and reporters at a competition. Now you're saying that you're not even going to compete at this competition. I will be the first to admit that if I worked at this competition, that if I worked in tennis in general, that I would be furious. I would probably be a little scared because I just had a top draw. People who bought tickets specifically to see her play, people who will watch specifically for her to play. The impact that having Naomi withdraw from this competition will have is tremendous. And it is valid to have those feelings. It is valid to feel that way. It is valid to see this and be, oh my gosh, this is not a great thing for tennis. This is not a great thing for the sport. What are we going to do? But there was something good that came out of it, in that the organizations for tennis have made a statement. And yes, it's an organization making a statement. We all know how that goes. We'll wait and see, right? But they at least took the step to come out and make a statement saying that they will look at ways to address athletes' mental health. Because Naomi raised a lot of concerns about this, and they were valid concerns. And she wasn't entirely correct or in the right in what she has said and how she has gone about these things. Her tweet from the 30th talking about how anger is a lack of understanding and change makes people uncomfortable. Yeah, change is going to make people uncomfortable. That's to be expected. But anger isn't always from a lack of understanding. There are people who can fully agree with her and still be angry about the fact that she's withdrawing, that she's not competing. You can fully understand and empathize with her. The nerves, the depression, the anxiety. You're on a big stage. And think about how young she is to be at this big of a stage. Yeah, this is something else that we take for granted a lot with athletes. Their careers are short and they start early. Most athletes' careers are either over or ending very soon by the time they hit their early to mid 30s. They're not going to be around much longer when they hit that point. Depending on the position you play or the sport you play, your your career may even be over or on the downslide before you even get to 30. And here she is at 23 years of age, the second best female tennis player in the world. At 23, having already won multiple Grand Slams. What are most people doing at 23? Most people are in college. Maybe they're working. Maybe they've gotten into a supervisor or manager role. But a lot of people are trying to figure their lives out at such a young age. But not athletes. Athletes have to be at the top of their game. A 23-year-old gets bashed by numerous people simply because she needs a break from doing something that the majority of us couldn't even imagine having happened to us at that age. How many of you, by the time you were 25, were the face of your organization, the face of your store, the face of your college? I'm willing to bet that it's a very small number. And that takes a toll. There's a lot of responsibility that goes with this. There's a lot of pressure for somebody who already deals with anxiety, who's been dealing with depression. That is a lot to put on someone. And for us to expect that they can't stumble, that they can't struggle. This tournament is going to hurt. This tournament suffers because she walked out. There's no denying that. There's no doubt about that. But will this monetary pain for them actually be something that can bring us forward in this field of sports psychology, that can bring us forward as a society in looking at how we treat and view athletes? And so after this short break, I do want to talk about that. I want to talk about what this situation will have as an impact on the grand scheme of things, and not just in this tiny moment, because it's going to cause ripples. You don't have something of this level and this magnitude happen without something changing, something being affected. And she was right in that point. The change is going to make a lot of people uncomfortable, but maybe it'll be for the better. Welcome back, everybody. So, in this final segment, I wanted to talk more about the impact that Naomi's decision is going to have on the grand scheme of things. We talked a little bit about the press and how that can be difficult and challenging. Talked a little bit about the tournament itself and how it will take a hit because of this. But I want to look at some of the windfall that's already happened since this. You look at a lot of Naomi's sponsors, and they easily could have backed out of deals or put her in breach of contract because she chose to step away. Instead, they came and backed her and supported her. Numerous other athletes have come out and supported her. Articles that probably never would have been written on the mental health of athletes have come out and been written. People saying that they support her. Journalists saying that they've played alongside other athletes and they've seen the pressure. Talking about how her walking away was the right decision for her to make. And it's great for people like myself who are either in or pursuing being in the field of sports psychology and working with athletes on the mental aspects of their game. This is huge. For people in the mental health realm in general, this is huge because this gives credibility to what many have been saying for a while now about the importance of mental health, about the connection between the mind and performance. Something that most people every day don't really take that much thought of. People that, especially kids, who are going to be struggling through a lot of things and a lot of changes while trying to have heightened performance. There's a lot of pressure put on these things. There's a lot of pressure put on us as athletes. Being a former athlete myself, I understand some of. I never got to those levels like Naomi. I never got to that professional. But I also never got there because of my mind. Yes, I was in a car wreck that left me with some pretty bad injuries. But it was my mind, my mental state that has forced me to struggle with going back to playing. that kept me from getting the recovery that I needed. Now, to take that and put that on such a larger scale, this is why what we do is so important. This is why sports psychology and mental health is so critical. Because it's not just a thing that, oh, you get over. Oh, you're not mentally strong enough to handle this. Who is? Just because we don't look like we're struggling on the outside, just because what you see in competition is top tier, doesn't always mean that we're not struggling. Just because you see athletes perform at a top level on a regular basis doesn't mean that they're not good at maybe putting those things aside for a moment. Maybe being on that court, being on that field, being on the pitch or on the ice or wherever it is that you play your sport. Maybe that's what makes so many other things go away. Maybe that's relief to some of these athletes. And so what you and I see as fans, as viewers, as consumers of these sports, as followers of these athletes, what we see isn't really what's going on. We're not getting the full picture. Maybe what we see is these athletes doing their best to live up to expectations, either real or perceived. They give us what they think we want to see. And now we've become so accustomed to it that when someone like Naomi comes out and says, I can't do this right now, it's a shock. Because we don't see athletes as humans anymore. My hope is that long term, this will be considered a major turning point. That this will be something that catches the world's attention and says enough is enough of trying to act like these athletes are superhuman every single minute of every single day. Maybe this is what it will take to get other top athletes to come out and speak out. Maybe this is what it will take for the culture in sports to change away from the, if you can't handle it, you're not mentally strong enough to be here. Instead of acknowledging the pressure that it takes and looking for ways to better serve our athletes in the realm of mental health, in the realm of their mentality. Maybe this is what it will take to start looking at an athlete's performance in a holistic manner and not just in a physical or tactical manner. Maybe this will show us that sometimes the numbers aren't everything, and that sometimes we all just need that break. We all just have to say, I need a breath. I need a moment. I applaud Naomi for what she did. I think it was right. I think it was needed. I think it was absolutely necessary. And I quite honestly don't think that it happening right at the end of Mental Health Awareness Month, I don't think that was a negative. I think that was perfect timing. I think when she did it was right. And I hope that you guys would take a look at what's gone on here and really step back. Whether you agree, whether you disagree, take a step back and look at the picture from a whole. And let's change how we view athletes and how we view mental health, not just for athletes, but for everyone. Because if this is what happens from the people who have to be at the top of their game all the time, what's it like for the everyday person, for the young athlete, for the new athlete, for people who aren't athletes? What are the struggles that they're going through? Think about that. And I will see you guys again next time. Please be sure to hit that like button, share this with your friends and family, and leave us a comment down below. Thank you everybody for watching. To stay up to date, make sure you're subscribed and hit that notification bell. Have a great day.